I'm Ben Meiselas from the MeidasTouch Network, and this is a breaking news alert. Special Counsel Jack Smith has subpoenaed the ex-National Security Advisor to Donald Trump, Robert O'Brien. O'Brien was the fourth National Security Advisor in the former Trump administration, and Special Counsel Jack Smith will be seeking testimony and information from O'Brien on both criminal investigations that are underway, both the investigation into 2020 election interference and the insurrection, as well as Special Counsel Jack Smith's investigation into Donald Trump's theft of thousands of government records, including classified records and sensitive compartmented information, our nation's highest classified records. Now, as the head of the NSA, O'Brien should have been involved in the handling of classified documents at the end of the Trump presidency and should have had knowledge how those documents ended up in Mar-a-Lago. The fact that O'Brien likely will not know the answer to those questions will itself show Donald Trump's intent to steal those records, the premeditation involved. And of course, Robert O'Brien was also intimately aware of Donald Trump's unlawful election interference. O'Brien spoke with the January 6th committee, and although O'Brien's testimony wasn't really prominently featured at all in the January 6th committee's report, and it was not really featured at all in any of the hearings, which you may recall as Matthew Pottinger, who was the top deputy to Robert O'Brien. Pottinger, he testified before the January 6th committee and gave very, very, very compelling testimony in the live hearings about how damaging and disturbing Donald Trump's conduct was leading up to the January 6th insurrection and on the insurrection itself. But as it relates to O'Brien, when we saw some of those depositions released, what O'Brien said before the January 6th committee would be, I think, very important to Special Counsel Jack Smith. But Special Counsel Jack Smith's also looking for something else that the January 6th committee didn't get. I'll tell you about that in a moment. But in terms of the testimony O'Brien gave to the January 6th committee, he described getting urgent calls and texts from people like Mitch McConnell and others telling him, please don't resign. We need an adult in the room. We actually need you to be there. We know that you would be inclined to resign based on Donald Trump's conduct, but please, we need you to stay. In his testimony, O'Brien said, Senator McConnell was telling me I need to get back to Washington and that I couldn't resign. One of the interesting things O'Brien also testified to, though, was Jake Sullivan, who is now Biden's national security advisor. At that time was the incoming, national security advisor, had called O'Brien and said, look, the Biden administration doesn't want you to resign right now. We need adults in the room right now as well, so we don't want you to resign right now. And that was coming from the Biden administration. It shows you that O'Brien is a respectable individual, a serious individual. O'Brien then said that he would want to make sure the transition of power went as smooth as it could possibly go. That also spells big, big trouble for Donald Trump. One of the things O'Brien also testified before the January 6th committee about, which I think will be particularly interesting to Special Counsel Jack Smith, is he was actually on the phone with former Vice President Pence within minutes of the evacuation in the loading dock beneath the Capitol when Pence was sheltering. O'Brien was also on the phone with Pence at the exact moment that Trump tweeted about Pence's refusal to aid him and basically egged on people to kill former Vice President Pence, and O'Brien was on the phone call. Okay, now what is Special Counsel Jack Smith after, though, that the January 6th committee did not yet get? Well, because Donald Trump asserted the executive privilege as it relates to O'Brien, we don't yet have O'Brien's testimony as it relates to his communications with Trump, his interactions with Trump. he's been prohibited from testifying. However, if there is a court order by Judge Beryl Howell, you've heard her name here on the MeidasTouch Network. She is the presiding judge over the criminal grand juries in the federal courthouse in Washington, D.C. Special Counsel Jack Smith will be able to get that testimony from Robert O'Brien. Robert O'Brien wants to give that testimony, in my opinion. He's just precluded from doing it based on the fact that you have a maniac criminal ex-president who's asserting this legal doctrine, even though he's asserting it falsely. You can't, as someone like O'Brien, if the assertion of executive privilege is made, you can't on your own, even though I think we'd all want him to, make the determination there's no executive privilege. So what you would do is say, let there be an order from the judge, and then I'll testify. Now, Special Counsel Jack Smith has now built brick by brick, as has Merrick Garland. This is why I was telling you, I know this is slow, but you have to build a case like this brick by brick, especially when Donald Trump is throwing out these roadblocks in the way of these bull crap privilege claims. But nonetheless, because he's an ex-president, he's able to at least assert it. It then has to be overruled. But you may recall our reporting here, though, about people like Pat Cipollone, the former top White House lawyer, as well as Patrick Philbin, who's Cipollone's top deputy in the White House legal office. You may remember our reporting on Mark Short, former VP Pence's former chief of staff, or Greg Jacob, who is former VP Pence's former general counsel. All four of them in different times also asserted the executive privilege because Trump forced them to. They weren't able not to assert it, but they said, look, we're happy to testify on these things. Just go get the order from Judge Beryl Howell compelling us to do it. It's exactly what Special Counsel Jack Smith did. Went to Beryl Howell. Beryl Howell ruled that they have to testify because, one, executive privilege doesn't apply here. But two, even if it did, the Department of Justice is the executive branch, and they have a compelling need to get this information. A former executive branch individual, even if it's the president like Trump, you can't say, I'm blocking a compelling information for a criminal investigation. That overrides the executive privilege. The executive privilege, in other words, is not absolute. So what do I expect Special Counsel Jack Smith to do? Show Judge Beryl Howell, look, here are your previous orders. Your previous orders apply right here. We're going to get this information from O'Brien. And I think O'Brien, in addition to what I just said to you about all of the things that he knows, will have additional information we don't yet know about regarding his communications with Donald Trump and his knowledge of Donald Trump's intent to steal these classified records. Also, having Robert O'Brien as a witness to testify about these classified records and how dangerous it is that Donald Trump stole it will, I think, be incredibly compelling to a jury. You want to know why I think it's going to be compelling? Just look, remember, you probably remember this, but look at Matthew Pottinger. Look at O'Brien's top deputy's testimony before the January 6th committee, just to remind you of it. We'll play it for you right now. Here, play the clip.
Our national security was harmed in a different way by the 6th of January, and that is that it, I think it emboldened our enemies by helping give them ammunition to feed a narrative that our system of government doesn't work, that the United States is in decline. China, the Putin regime in Russia, Tehran, they're fond of pushing those kinds of narratives. And by the way, they're wrong. We've been hearing for the entirety of U.S. history from kings and despots that the United States is in decline, and those kings and despots have been proven wrong every single time. But nonetheless, January 6th helped feed a perception that I think emboldens our adversaries. The other part I think is simply our allies. I heard from a lot of friends in Europe, in Asia, allies, close friends, and supporters of the United States that they were concerned about the health of our democracy. And so I think it's incumbent upon us to put their minds at ease, to put our own hearts at ease by investigating what happened on the 6th and making sure that it never happens again.
Right, so that was Robert O'Brien's top deputy. You see how compelling that testimony is. Imagine that testimony before a jury. Now imagine Robert O'Brien's testimony against Donald Trump in front of a jury. It's going to be very compelling, folks. This is why this testimony is such blockbuster news, and I'm honored to report it. Now, you also know that back in January, Donald Trump's lawyer, Jim Trusty, contacted the FBI and the DOJ and said, "We have a laptop from hell." Well, he didn't use those exact words, but he said, "We found a classified folder at Mar-a-Lago, and we found a laptop." The laptop wasn't at Mar-a-Lago, but we found this laptop that's possessed by a Trump aide, a current top Trump aide, where the classified information from Mar-a-Lago was on the laptop from hell. So what does this all spell, folks? This spells that indictments are coming for Donald Trump. I've said it. My prediction was May, June. Others predicted earlier. I never believed the earlier predictions. And this isn't about hopium. This is about following the data, following where Special Counsel Jack Smith's going, right? We talked about former Vice President Pence being subpoenaed by Jack Smith. We talked about former DHS Acting Secretary Chad Wolf being subpoenaed, Ken Cuccinelli, the top deputy at the DHS, being subpoenaed, Tom Fenton, the wannabe lawyer from Judicial Watch, whatever the group's called, subpoenaed, went before the grand jury, Stephen Miller before the grand jury, Cipollone, Philbin, Short, Jacob. These actions are not the actions of a special prosecutor who's not going to indict. These are the actions where indictments are imminent. I'm Ben Meiselas from the MeidasTouch Network. Hey, do me this favor, please. Hit the subscribe button. We are on our way to 1 million subscribers thanks to your incredible support. So please hit the subscribe button now. In addition, check us out at patreon.com/MeidasTouch, patreon.com/MeidasTouch. I think you will love the exclusive content we have on our Patreon, but most importantly, it helps grow this independent media platform. So if you can join it, become a member at our Patreon now. Also, check out Killing County on Hulu, executive produced by myself, Colin Kaepernick, and a team of others. I think you will love Killing County. Crime, corruption, cover-up in Bakersfield, Kevin McCarthy's district. Until next time, I'm Ben Meiselas.
At MeidasTouch, we are unapologetically pro-democracy, and we demand justice and accountability. That's why we're spreading our message to Convict 45. That's right, gear up right now with your Convict 45 tees and pins at store.meidastouch.com. That's store.meidastouch.com.